We recently heard about scandal and how to properly take care of our neighbor by not being a bad example. We have to be considerate even of their weaknesses and behave in a way that won't hurt them even accidentally. But there's more to charity than just avoiding scandal. There are also positive things to be done, duties towards our neighbor which we must perform. I'd like to talk today particularly about those duties in church. Because when we're in church, especially at Mass, we have a special role to play in relation to our neighbor. It's not so different from our everyday role, but it is more important here in church, because from here, all the rest of our lives are shaped. Here is the very source of grace and our contact with Him. So we need to be sure that what goes on in here is done as well as it can be done, so we can profit as much as we should. If we will not do our best here, when we are doing our most important job of worshiping God, then we can be sure that everything else will be affected negatively. So what should and can we do? Well, we all have the basic duty to not be distracting to others in church, and of helping others to pray. So we should try to be on time, and sit still, and all of that, not mumbling our prayers out loud so that they can be heard by others who might not be saying the same prayers. And if you have a special role at Mass, maybe serving at the altar or singing in the choir, those things are to help the whole community pray better. So you want to make sure that you're prepared, knowing how to serve, and being practiced at what you're going to sing. But what about more generally than that? Since not everyone can sing or serve, what should we all be doing even if we're just attending Mass? Well, God created Adam and Eve to tend the garden, to watch over, care for, and protect His creation. They represented the whole human race, but they blew it. Eve listened to the serpent, Adam listened to Eve, and, well, we know the rest of the story. But that does not change the nature of the roles that each of them had. Man still has the job of protecting and caring for the natural order of things, and women are still there to tell him how to do that. To help him do that. That might sound silly, but I mean it. People think the distinction these days between men and women somehow means that women are inferior, that feelings are less important than reason. That's so far from the truth, it's almost blasphemous. Men and women have different roles, but it took both of them to fail before sin changed the world. If only one of them had done his job, we wouldn't be in this mess. So what about coming to church? How can we hold up our end of the bargain now, since each of us has his job to do? Did you know, for example, that there are parts in the Missal that even tell the priest where his eyes should be looking at certain times? How he behaves is that important. That's the role he's been given in this divine plan, and if he does not fulfill that role as well as he can, everyone suffers. What if the priest went up there in jeans and sneakers and just sort of did what he felt like doing during Mass? Well, I'm kind of tired today. I don't think I'll hold my hands up the way the book says I should. All this genuflecting, I'm kind of sore. I'm going to skip a few of those genuflections. He'd not only be offending God, but he'd also be cheating all of you out of grace. He would be failing in his role as a conduit of grace. But as we just saw, we all stand before God and hold certain places in His plan, places upon which others depend, as Adam and Eve depended upon each other. If we willingly fail, we disrupt the grace that was meant to flow into the world through us. And look what happened when Adam and Eve failed in their roles. In order to do the most good you can, to call down and be a conduit for as much grace as possible, don't you want to put in the best showing possible, to behave your best, to look your best, in order to be the most pleasing to God and to win from Him the grace that is meant to come to the world through you, to point souls towards God and not towards ourselves, or worse, towards sin? Then you need to do the job as well as you can. Men, you have to act like what you're meant to be, protectors and leaders, representatives of your family. Come to church as a worthy representative of our society. Do the best you can. Don't wear t-shirts and jeans if you have something nicer. Wear a collar if you have one. Shave. Pay attention and pray. Help keep order in the church, from ushering to helping with the children. Take your proper spiritual place so that grace can flow properly for everyone. Be examples to those around you and lead them in prayer. Men, when you're in church, you need to help create an environment in which people can pray, keep order, and be a good example. That's your job. Ladies, you have a place in this hierarchy too, and as we saw with Eve, if you willingly fail, you can bring the whole thing down just as easily as the men can. You have to help the men fulfill their duties. Get them organized. Most men, if they had to get out the door on time for Sunday Mass, they wouldn't get there till Tuesday. Help him to pray and be a good example. And how can you do that? There are several ways, but consider this when you come to church, in a public place. Men are very motivated by seeing the good that they're working for. Ladies, you represent all the good things that men live and long for. You represent life itself, as you are the bearers of life. And mystically, you represent the church, the bride of Christ, the bearer of spiritual life, that life which man was made for. You are and you represent the most precious things in the created and spiritual orders. So carry yourself accordingly. As the representative of the church and of life, be an inspiration to men by your dress, your decorum, and your modesty. Not just your man, but to men. Whether you're married or single, a mother or not, your significance is still the same. You represent the reason a man wants to be good. You are a beacon. Be virtuous. Be the calming, moderating influence. Your dress and your composure should moderate men's passions, not stir them up. Men would rule with violence and force if women did not soften and calm them so that they could rule like God, with love. If you act your part, the men will act theirs. All the pieces will be in place, and spiritually, we will all be beneficial for each other. Eve should not have failed Adam, but still, Adam should not have failed the rest of us. The devil was clever to use Eve this way, but you see how much each has to be what he is called to be in order for the other to be what he should be. It's not just a hierarchy. It's symbiotic. Each depends on each. We help each other to be holy. We have to consider our neighbor. This is charity. A few other pointers. Men have the added burden of being pretty easily distracted. We need to be aware of that. Take proper precautions. Practice custody of the eyes. Help the women understand how weak men can be and how they can help protect them. Help teach your daughters modesty. And ladies, you have the burden of being beautiful. It's a great responsibility. Men are attracted to beauty. Make sure you use yours well. Beauty is yours in order to lead men to virtue, not to yourself. Ladies, remember that bit before about considering your neighbor's weakness and acting accordingly, acting charitably? This is an area where men are weak. You don't have to understand that, you just have to accept it. Please accept this. It's a fact. When it comes to the beauty of women, men are weak. So guys, you want to make sure that you don't let your eyes and your mind wander. And gals, you want to make sure that you're not the thing that might distract men in church, or be a temptation for them, in church or anywhere else. This is, among other things, one of the many reasons, for chapel veils, and why Rome actually spells out some basic principles for dress. Men are easily distracted, and women are beautiful. So women can be beautiful and edifying, leading men to virtue, not beautiful and leading men towards themselves, nor dressing to impress the other ladies. I made reference there to the rules of the church concerning dress. Last time I did that, someone actually asked me, what are those rules? So now might be a good time to go over that if you're not familiar with those rules. Obviously, not everyone is. There are lots of things we're ignorant of. With the approval of the Pope, a statement was issued by the Diocese of Rome, which gave some basic guidelines. Now, if you've not heard these before, don't worry. You're not the only one. Just thank God that you're hearing them today, and now you can do more to help people be holy. And if you can tell that someone's not heard these before, leave them alone. We're all here to learn, and you can be plenty sure that there are lots of things you don't know either. We're here to learn and to help each other. So those guidelines from Rome. A top must not be cut lower than 2 fingers' breadth below the pit of the throat. Shoulders must be covered, and skirts that scarcely cover the knee are not sufficient. Transparent material is improper, and so obviously would be tight clothing. That's a rough paraphrase. The document states that clothing that did not fit the guidelines could not be called decent. So that means it's not really just a matter for when you come to church, but all of the time. Now some will object that these standards are almost 100 years old. Well, my reply would be that of a friend of mine. Has human nature suddenly become more holy, virtuous in the last 100 years? Have men magically returned to their pre-fallen state, wherein the beauty of the human body was not a distraction or a temptation? It's not a question of the style of the day, or of what people are used to. It's a question of human nature, and it's not a question of something wicked. It's good things that attract us, beautiful things. In any event, the point is that each of us has a role to play in church in order to properly play our part in God's plan for grace in the world. What we do here in church determines how everything else goes, and each of our roles, from priest to choir to servers to men and women preparing for Mass and praying in the pews, each role affects the others. I have to do my job at the altar the way the book says to. The choir has to know its part and work together for the glory of God. The servers have to know what they're doing so they can help me do what I get to do. Men have to be spiritual leaders and women have to be the heart, motivating and moderating the community by their modesty and their virtue. Each has his role to play, and if he will not, he is being uncharitable to his neighbor. He is limiting the grace that will flow, and heaven forbid that by their dress they may be an occasion of sin to their neighbor. This is charity, to do our part, so that our neighbor may do his part as well as possible. We are here to help each other, so let's do that.